So welcome everyone to today's social system mapping sense-making session for June 5th, not May 1st. Oops, there. And I think what I will do is, let's see who, Amy's joining us. Okay. So what this is for those of you who are new to this, it's a vision about a possibility, the possibility being that social system mapping can help communities and change networks become self-organizing more quickly and become impactful also. So increase the wisdom as well as the connectivity in within communities. It's a learning opportunity about the process of social system mapping, from the technical process to the social process to the sense making, to all of the cycle of social system mapping we're learning about together. It's an opportunity to contribute your own experience and insight, because while there's a big technical component of social system mapping, there's also huge social components, and all of you present have experience and insight into what would make the processes of and the methodology of social system mapping stronger. And so it's a multilateral shared learning opportunity, which is a community of practice. And it's also a relationship with our map. And I think all of you here are on our map. So I invite you, we're not going to look at the map today, but I invite you all to, if you haven't in a while, go in and update your profile, see if there's any new questions that you haven't answered since they've been added, plus see if there's any changes, any stronger relationships or new relationships that you've built in the community since you last went in there. So I invite you all to do that. Welcome, Christy. Welcome, Amy. See you. And so today's objectives, as usual for these sessions, is that you come away with a sense of the potential that we're inspired by. And I just realized, I thought, Rebecca, I don't think you're on the map. So Kara, if you could make sure Rebecca has a link to put herself on the map, that'd be great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So that you come away with a sense of the potential that we're inspired by, that you meet some cool folks and feel welcomed by them, that you're at least come away at least a little bit curious about how social system mapping can support a network in learning how to deal with complexity and be good systemic change agents, and that you'll see and that you'll see a framework from human systems dynamics that's useful to understand some of the underlying fundamentals. So for today's agenda, it's pretty simple. It's like it usually is for these sessions. We'll do some introductions and framing. We'll do we're not going to do our map updates. Sorry, I didn't read the agenda close enough. What we will do a 5-minute breakout, and then we'll come back and talk about some theory. We'll do some more breakouts and some more theory, and then we'll reflect and review. So let's go ahead and get started with our introductions. I think we just had another new person, but Kara will put I don't have the chat open, so I'm not. We'll put a link to the tool, this slide presentation tool called Mentimeter, where you can on some of these slides we'll be asking you to share some thoughts and some input, and you can do that using that link that Kara will put it in. I think that's not the sharing link, Kara. The voting link. So it should be short. I can get it.
Got it.
You got it. Okay. So the voting link is the link that you can open to share your thoughts. And let's go ahead and have you start out by sharing your name, pronouns, location, and a network or networks that you're supporting in some way. Put them all together in one comment field. And then when you're done doing that, you want to probably toggle back to the Zoom dashboard where I'm sharing my screen so that you can see other people's responses. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'm not sure how to get to the board. I filled in this first opt-in form. Now I need to go back to my emails and get a validation link.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that I would propose that you come back to that, like maybe leave that open somewhere and come back to that. Because if you're filling in the survey right now, you won't be able to engage with what we're doing right here. So
Okay.
unless you're really good at
Okay.
toggling back and forth. So for now, if you go back to the chat and click on the voting link, have you done that?
Oh, I see. Now I see it. Okay, let's see.
And so then Rebecca Kramer, we're just giving you a moment. I'm going to go ahead and move forward for a moment so that others can move forward. And then, so another thing I'd like you to share in the Mentimeter, the next slide is one big challenge you experience in doing collaborative work in networks. Show answers. I'm not a patient person either. Whoever put shared leadership, I get impatient. Competing organizational strategies come to attention. Yes. Yes, making the work a shared priority. Yeah. Self-organizing. Ideas posed but fizzles when it comes to execution. Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very familiar. Taking time to shift thinking is kind of a big key solution to all of those, but really hard to find the time, isn't it? Yes, various understandings of what networks even are, encompassing all connections in a meaningful manner. Effective communication channels without gatekeepers and without overwhelm. Yeah. Okay, so let's keep those in mind as a potential challenge that will work. What you will work more with as we move forward. And going to the next slide. So how familiar are you with social system mapping? It's good to get a sense of where everyone is at and how to group you together based on levels of awareness or experience. Okay. I think Jim has joined us. Oh, he's maybe not. There you are. Hi.
Hey.
We're doing the social system mapping poll. Okay, you're good. You're caught up already. Welcome back from your trip. Okay, so most people have at least everyone has at least a rough idea, and it looks like we have one person who's maybe not comfortable finding their way around, and we'll take that into consideration as we move forward. Yeah, thanks, Kara. Next one is, how familiar are you with human systems dynamics? This is a separate sort of field, and it's was founded by Glenda Ouyang, and we find it dovetails with social system mapping really nicely, but it's not what we usually focus on here. And so I just want to see how, I mean, it's not our field to be training it to be, it's not the main thing we do, but we do like to help people get familiar with it. So one person's not sure what we're talking about, so that's good to know, and having a rough idea. It's a few people, and some of us have been through the training, and some of us have been introduced. So we have a range of experience with social system mapping and with human systems dynamics. So a social system map, what is that? It's a mashup of a system map. So something that might look like this, a stakeholder map. These are various kinds of stakeholder maps, an asset map. This is an asset map, but they come in various forms and shapes and forms, social network map, and a concept map. So it's a mashup of all of these kinds of maps, but it's the difference is, and the difference is important, that each of these kinds of map is kind of 1 or 2 dimensional at most. And so they're fairly simple to read, even though they might look complex at first. You can read them without having to, move your head in different angles or having to hold multiple things at once. And a social system map is much more dimensional than any of these maps, both in terms of time and in terms of combining a lot of different kinds of dynamics that can go on in a social system. And so it's more dynamic, and it's more overwhelming, and it also can give us deeper insight that we can't get with any of those less dimensional maps. But it takes some time to learn how to do that. It takes some effort. So, or I should say, you can start right away, but you can continue to learn from it over time and get more and more out of it. So it's also a process more than a product. It's online, it's interactive, it's accessible to all network members in a way that all network members are able to do their own sort of digging into the data to find what they're looking for. And it's an iterative, emergent, dynamic, and ongoing collective practice. So that tells you what it is, but why? But so what? Why are we doing that? I mean, why do we make these things? And social system mapping is really about systemic transformation. So it's about supporting an already existing global movement that you're all already a part of, that is working to shift from systems of dominance, exploitation, and extraction to systems of connection and reverence and regeneration. So however we frame that, whether it's anti-racism or it's environmentalism or all kinds of other ways, there's myriad ways of framing it. Social system mapping is meant to help any of those framings be more effective and quicker at supporting that shift. Then the thing we know about systemic transformation is that systemic transformation requires strong networks. So it's not just an individual heroic leader thing. It's not just an individual organization saves the day. It's networks of different kinds of organizations, different kinds of individuals that all come together. And so strong networks of wise change agents. So my framing is we could make strong networks that aren't transformational at all. And some kinds of anyway, I won't go there, but there are networks that are just very much strongly clinging to the status quo. That's not a transformational network, but it could be a really super strong network. So we're trying to create strong networks of wise change agents, and it's that wise change agent part that has to do with that is required for systemic transformation. And so in this transformation, I like to say that there are basically two shifts that we have to look at. One is the relational shift, the shift from, what a lot of people now call the separate self to what we could call an interbeing self or an interdependent self or symbiotic selves. not only in terms of individuals, people, but also in terms of our relationships to other life forms, other beings, to the planet, etc. So from separate self to interbeing self is the relational shift that we talk about a lot. But there's another shift, because like I just said, we could have really super strong relationships and not be making a dent in how our systems are reproducing systems of dominance, oppression, extraction, etc. So we also need to think clearly and regularly about the cognitive shift. So the cognitive shift means shifting from a mechanistic worldview of command and control and, a simplistic cause and effect to a complex adaptive systems worldview that is much more like a living system, that's more ecosystemic and more an understanding how to work in complexity, because complex systems require a different mindset than simple systems. And so recently, was thinking about this and realized, okay, they're the same thing, right? So the cognitive shift actually is exactly the relational. I mean, they're just two different ways of framing the work in our minds, but both have to be going on at the same time. And so, I could say anything about a cognitive shift, and people could say, oh, well, that's just, framing it in a relational shift, or I could say the opposite, a relational thing, and someone could say, well, that's just, framing it in a systems thinking way. So you could do that, but what happens if you say it's the shift as opposed to two shifts is that, it's like this little shortened dowel in this picture, where if you look at it from one angle, like from this angle, it looks like a circle. And if you look at it from this angle, it looks like a square. And so if we say this angle is the relational shift that we're talking about, and this angle is the cognitive shift that we're talking about, we could, if we're only looking at it from one angle, we could never notice, if we're just looking at it from the relational angle, we could never notice the angles. We could never notice the flat lines and the corners that come with the cognitive shift. For instance, these are metaphorical, but because we're not looking at it that way. And so a lot will be obscured and a lot will be missed, and that will weaken our efforts. At the same time, we could look at it just systemically. So I see a lot of systems thinkers who pay a lot of attention to the thinking part and the complexity part, but pay no attention to the relational part. They are also missing a lot. So they'll see, they'll say, okay, here's our square, we're working with our square, and they'll totally miss the curved lines, and they'll totally miss just the difference. And so in either case, if we're only looking at it from one angle or the other angle, things are getting obscured, things are getting left out, that will weaken our efforts. And we can't just do it, so look at this once and then look at that once, because every shift in one side, from one dimension makes a shift in another dimension. And so we're always having to go back and forth and back and forth. And as they do that, that is a feedback loop in and of itself. So we don't want to be neglecting either side ever. And we want to just keep going back and forth. And so that's a thing that, that I hammer on a lot. And so we say that a social system map helps us to work on both levels at the same time, or at least we have all of, much of what we need to both look relationally and look cognitively in a social system map. And that's what we want to develop the methodology around, helping people dig deeper into both of those shifts. So that is the a little bit of the purpose of a social system map is to work on both of those shifts. I'm going to pause here or stop, and we will do a 5-minute breakout. And the breakout will be for you to just introduce yourselves if you haven't met before. We have a lot of really regular people here, but I'm assuming that some of you still haven't met all of you. I mean, none of you have met all of you, or there's still some new people or some new connections to make. And so introduce yourselves and then share a challenge that you have been working collaboratively in networks. Like the one you put in the Mentimeter a few minutes ago. So does anybody have any questions before we put you into your breakout rooms? Hang on, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see everybody at once. No questions? We're all good? Okay. Go ahead, Kara, take them away. 5 minutes, if I didn't say that. Welcome back, everybody. Lisa will be back with us in a moment. She found a wood tick, so we're
Oh.
a mini wood tick drama that requires screen off.
They aren't supposed to be in my office.
Okay, so I'm going to just jump right back in and get share. Also, so this isn't, so we've talked about what a social system map is. We've talked about what its purpose is. And now we're going to talk quickly about how our theory of how a social system map can support systemic change, about how this can work. And I started sharing my screen, right? You all can see it. Yep. Is that okay? Thanks. And okay. So this is in the beginning, and some of your networks might be in this stage, and many of them are far beyond this stage. But in the beginning, there's a group of people that may know each other or may not know each other, but they have something in common, some sort of shared purpose or shared vision or shared desire to do some kind of make the world better in some kind of way. And so there are people with shared vision, as the summary way of saying that. At some point, they become aware enough that there are others with this shared vision, whether they know each other or not, that they realize that if they were to get together and work together, they could create the changes that they're trying to make in the world would ripple out and they would be more impactful. So they realize they want to start to think about or talk about creating a network around this shared vision. Some of the people in the network, not all of them, but some will actually say, hey, I want to do something about that. I don't want to just sit and think about it and talk about it, but I want to actually start to create this network or start to support or nurture this network. When people come to social system mapping, they might be in any of these stages that I'm referring to. Their network might already be in any of these stages. But what I'm pointing out here is that there will be a group of people who say, who take on responsibility to make something happen. And they will start to talk with each other. They will start to meet or convene or start to think about how could we do this. And so we've got this little purple swath, which indicates convening, coming together, being in relationship with one another. At some point, as these people will get together and then they will start to spread that convening and being in relationship to one another and planning and thinking together with the rest of the people with this shared vision. So the people who've chosen to be responsible will start inviting the rest of the people together and they will start having conversations and they will start building relationships. At some point, these people who have taken on responsibility will start to feel like they need to understand the players in the system better. They need to do more to understand, do these people know each other? How are they working together? They might need to understand what parts of the system do they represent, etc. So they start to have this need for more information in their heads, and whether they envision that as a social system map or not, they start to sort of imagine what it is they want to see more of and that they can't currently see more of. And this is where people generally, any of these phases, but at some point people will find social system mapping, they'll find some app and they'll say, oh, I think that could help us. And so then they'll have an idea of making a social system map. I'll back that up. So these people often will, these people down here will have probably not much need for that social system map, not much understanding of what, like zero understanding of what a social system map is, not a whole lot of motivation to help create a social system map. Some might. It's great for them to be invited. They should be invited, and to the degree that they're willing and available to get their help in designing the map, finding out what questions do we need to like what do we want to understand about the network, et cetera. That's really valuable and important and necessary. At the same time, if there's not a lot of motivation down there, the best thing to do is to just get started and let it iterate as you move forward. So in this picture, these people are going to design a social system mapping survey and launch a social system mapping initiative. And that survey will gather data from the people down here below, and the data will go into the map. They'll get a map that people can engage with and work with. And so then the people on the ground can access the data in the map as well. So there's this initial loop of people put data into the map, and then people can get data out of the map. In the beginning, it's generally often the people who have taken on responsibility for generating and supporting and guiding this network. They will use the map the most. They will start to introduce people. They will start to use the map to discover, where there are common topics or themes or strategies that they can convene around. So they will both use it for helping to design these convenings that they are doing or inform these convenings, and they'll also use it to help inform relationship building across the network. As this cycle goes, and as they start to do this convening and sharing the map with people, they'll start to get more input. So that input that I said would be great in the beginning probably often doesn't come a whole lot in the beginning. In some networks, depending on how developed it is, it does, but especially in a really beginning network, it's hard to get that kind of interest. But as we see, as people start to play with the map and look at the map, they'll start to just organically say, hey, why didn't you ask this question? Or I think we need to ask that question. Or we should be looking for, why aren't we looking for X? And why aren't we asking about Z? And so that is really valuable information that the mappers or the people responsible for the map take back and can start to add new questions, new dimensions that they're looking for in the data. And so, oops, what the hell? It's in the, okay, I'm going to go back to here and see. I'm just going to do it here because it's going to take us too much time for me to fuss with the. Okay, so we were here and terrible. So we're getting information, and now what we're going to do is we're going to, let me just skip. So as the data we start to get more input, feedback about the map, the data starts to get closer to the actual, what the network actually needs and wants. So closer to the core purpose of the network, it becomes more contextual and less generic. And so that there's that loop with the data. And then as it gets more, the data gets more closer to the heart of what's really needed, you can start to do, so this orange swooping is SenseMaking, is the cognitive part of the shift. So the purple is essentially the relationship building part of this shift, the relational shift, and the orange is the cognitive shift. And so we can start to do more of the cognitive shift as the data gets more and more specific and less generic. And then, that becomes its own feedback loop. More people start to be interested in using the map and wanting things from the map. And so we have another iteration of changes to the map, and the data gets closer to the purpose of the network, which enables more complexity thinking and systems thinking. So the cognitive shift, as well as more of the relational shift. And then over time, the data gets even more specific. That enables both of those relational shifts to get stronger and to come closer together and it enhances that feedback loop that I talked about between the two different perspectives and ways of looking at this shift. And in the end, the data is aligned, the relationships are aligned, and our understanding is aligned. And we have this, what we call the vortex of, a big increase in energy that has been building and capacity that has been building over time to make the shifts that we're talking about. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to just pause. And Amy or Lisa, I'm thinking if anybody has any comment, we have a little ahead. And so just if anyone has question or comment before we move to Lisa's part, Tom.
In the past, Christine, I think you've mentioned where you feel the networks you've been working with are on that. I think like right now, like you said, it's an emerging thing. So if you had to pick one of those stages, like where would be the most advanced, or maybe where's the most, or most people are right now?
Yeah. Well, I would say that our map is probably the most advanced, because our own community practice map is probably the most advanced, because we have a team that's responsible for it. We work on, like we have processes in place to continually explore this and iterate the map. And I would say that we're sort of, not at the round white arrows, but sort of in the middle. We're not to the last slide. We're not to the second to last slide, but we're sort of further in than that round slide. And I don't know of, there might be out there, there could possibly be someone who's built a map without ever consulting our community of practice or me, that has just, got the software and done it on their own, that's further along than this. I would be surprised, because I don't know how they would get there on their own. And I would be surprised if they didn't talk to us if they were that far along. And I don't know a map that's for this, the reamp map is pretty close, but it took a big pause in its development. And it doesn't have a collective process for co-iterating and redesigning the map, but it's pretty close in terms of their cognitive shift in using the map for their cognitive shift. Yeah. Other comments or questions before we hand it off to Lisa? Okay, looks good. Lisa, you can take it away. And just we'll share on my screen since I have it, and you'll just tell me when to.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Where to go.
Let me just do a little setup. So this is the part where we're going to talk about a human systems dynamics model or method. We've been really mostly playing with those. Last month we did a different one, but we're finding that human system dynamics, and you don't need to know anything about them to learn their models and methods, but there's a really great pairing of it when we're thinking about sense making of our social system, because human systems dynamics really helps us understand self-organizing systems, helps us understand how to work in a lot of uncertainty with a lot of difference in our communities and how to work with that. And so in these monthly sense making sessions, we've been bringing, once in a while, we've been bringing a method from HSD. And the one that we want to bring today is about how to understand difference across your networks or your communities. And it's called Same Different. And it's actually a pretty quick to learn method and model that we use in HSD. So I'm going to introduce it a little bit, give you a few examples, and then we're going to actually apply it to the community of this community, the community of practice, and work with it a little bit and then see how it might fit for your networks and communities. Christine, do you mind sharing the slides now?
Hang on.
I'm also trying to not worry that I have other wood ticks crawling on me at the moment. I went for a hike yesterday and found a lot of them, but I totally thought they were all gone by today.
That would be
Don't want those, don't want those hanging out. Okay, so we are looking at this method for working with difference. And it's especially helpful if you have any kind of sticky issue or challenge. We asked you about a challenge when you first came in the room. So you can be thinking about your challenge that you mentioned in your network or in your community. And it can really be helpful because it can help us see what might be emerging. And often when we're working in so much uncertainty, we want to look for the patterns, right? So we're looking at patterns that are happening in our communities and networks. And so starting to think about that, what's the pattern at play with the challenge you mentioned? And that often points to a place where we can do more of a focused question around what's same and different. And ultimately what that's doing is helping us find the difference in that moment that will make a difference for kind of moving forward with trying something. And it's all about that adaptation of trying something and then learning from that and cycling back. So we put this in the context of adaptive action in human systems dynamics. That helps us with that emergence because we're always taking what we're noticing in that pattern and then making meaning about it. So the what are we observing right now? What are we noticing right now? So that can be the challenges that you mentioned in Mentimeter. And so what is the meaning making we do with that? So what's most important about that right now? What's emerging as most sort of has most tension in it right now? And then that can point us to the action that we want to try with our networks and our communities. And then we take that back into the cycle and learn from it. So this is one of the really kind of the bedrock models that we use in human systems dynamics to help us adapt in that emergent space, in that uncertain space. So if we add the same different model into this, here's what the questions would look like. So we'll go to the next slide here. So we start with what is that tension or challenge you're having right now in a network? And often we'll talk about a sticky issue or wicked issue. You'll hear this when you're looking at things like uncertainty and complexity. It's those problems that seem stuck. They seem two sides of a polarity. They seem like they keep coming back. You've tried something and it keeps coming back to that place. So that's why we call it a sticky issue. But it can be any sort of thing, even a tension you're feeling between maybe two sets of groups in your network. Or it could be like one of the challenges I put into the challenge was noticing the tension between different organizational strategies of organizations that are trying to create a network, and they're having different organizational strategies that are coming to a tension point. So that's the what. And then the so what question is, so what is same and different? And finding that place you want to focus in the sticky issue to determine what is same or different. And once you create that, we're just neutral to that. We're just trying to kind of list out as many similarities and differences as we can. Then we really focus in on the differences to find the difference that's going to make a difference right now. What's the one thing we want to try or test right now? What's one thing that has a really positive effect that we've noticed in our network we want to maybe expand or magnify? Or what's one thing that has a more negative effect that we want to explore why, or see if we can shift? And then we take that action step in the now what cycle. We take the action step to try it out and come back and do another adaptive round with it. So sometimes we have to zoom in and zoom out to find the right same difference. So I'm going to give you just a few examples and we'll try it out of places where I've used this and just so you can hear a few examples of how it works. So recently I was working with a group of leaders of a community organizing movement, and the leaders were trying to share leadership. And they had they hadn't worked together. Some of them had worked closely together before, and some of them were kind of new to the shared leadership group. So they did this version of a same different about kind of what their perspectives were about shared leadership. And they actually came to this point, because it's an organization that has a compensation framework. They actually came to a real difference in how they understand compensation, how they get paid, and how it relates to what they're trying to do in movement work and community organizing. And it was such an interesting example, because then they found that difference that makes a difference. They also have very different styles around, some of them are much more comfortable with sort of adaptation. Some of them like more clear plans in place. Some of them come from a more science background. Some of them come from a more community organizing background, and some of a more social change kind of focused background. Those are all differences too, but the difference that emerged in that example was how we get paid. We have a real difference. Like, some of us like, no, we are professionals, we need to get paid. We also need, and others are like, if we get paid too much, that's really creating a gap between us and all the rest of the community organizers. So there's this like, so that was the difference that made the difference in that moment, in that particular community. So that's just one example. A while ago, I was part of a spiritual community where we were really looking at anti-racism. And so I didn't actually do this with the community. I did this as part of learning HSD, did my own same difference, because we were getting so stuck in some of our conversations. And the difference that made a difference that emerged from that was really, there was this wide breadth of understanding of what racism was, from individual personal racism to like the structural systemic racism, and understanding that was where we were really getting stuck in what we needed to do as a community together about it. So these are just some examples of using same different, but we thought it might be helpful to kind of see it in action and using the community around social system mapping. And so, Christine, where am I? I got excited as I was telling you the examples. So let's go to the what question for this example, which would be, what is kind of a sticky issue or a challenge that happens in the social system community practice. And you'll see we framed it up for you here in the slide, which is, members of the community of practice have different levels of engagement and like connection or involvement. And so it can make it difficult to design meetings such as the one we're in that engage all participants, because there's different levels of connection to social system mapping. And so that's the framing of the sticky issue. Let me just check in with Christine here. If there's anything you want to add or.
Yeah, I'd say it's not, I mean, it's levels of engagement and connection with the community, but it's also levels of understanding of social system mapping, from like, I've never seen one, I don't know what you're talking about, all the way to, yes, I do this professionally. And also the complexity, systems thinking shifts. Some of us have been thinking systemically for decades, and some of us come from a much more relational background or organizing background, and are like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so to do anything with these broad set of differences can be challenging. And so was the same difference we were going to look at.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you can see the zoom in, zoom out is working right here, because in some ways, Christine just gave us some differences. If we were going to do a same different exercise, Christine's already mentioning some of the differences. So maybe we're zooming out a little bit and just talking about what is same different about those of us who are involved in this, right? And some of the differences Christine mentioned were, we have different levels of experience with social system mapping, or we have different, like we have different connections or involvement levels that we're able or sort of prioritizing. Like there's just these differences. So that's making me think, Christine, that it's a zoom out even a little bit on that.
Well, yeah, and we sort of zoomed out, and then now we're going to sort of in a way zoom back in and explore that involvement difference, same and different of that. Yeah. So in other words, nested containers of where we look at this
Right.
different. Yeah, that's great. Okay.
And it doesn't even matter. I mean, it doesn't even matter if you're feeling like it actually doesn't matter. We can just keep going forward, even if we're not exactly at the same level, but just knowing that, like, that's a sign that we're in this emergence complexity, right? Is that there's these nested levels.
Yeah.
So we ask this so what question here, which is, so what are the same or different needs and or reasons for individuals being part of the community of practice? So let's just look at that and just do that together. So you would have the way the model works is that you would just put all the similarities and list it out together. You can have people work individually and then collectively create your list, or you can just do it together, which is what we're doing right now. So there's a Mentimeter question, and maybe Kara, do you mind just popping the Mentimeter link in again? So what's similarity? And again, it's on the Mentimeter thing. You can see what the question is. What is the same about the needs or reasons for participating in the community sessions? So you can start with that. Let's just start with the similarities, and then we'll go to the differences. So I'll just take a few minutes to answer here, and there's some coming up already, which is, I'll read them in a minute, but let's just take a few minutes to do it together, to give you a time to do it on the Mentimeter. Give me another minute.
Oh. What?
Does it just keep scrolling, or do you have to scroll it, Christine, to see all of them?
It just scrolls down. It keeps scrolling down.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't go back up again. So I have to go drive it up when we're ready for that. But we can see the new ones as they're coming.
Mm-hmm. So I think, why don't you scroll back up to the top, and you can see how when you're doing this with the group, often there'll be themes that emerge in doing this. So you can see a theme around learning, wanting to learn together, having shared values, commitment to social change and transformational change. What else are you seeing in here?
Leadership and shifting our own mindsets, like we engage.
Yep.
All of that.
And examples of successful and examples of successes and failures, I think, so we can learn from.
And enjoyment and share, just community.
Yep.
Being together.
It's great. It's a good list.
It is. I like it.
I like it. You can use that. Let's keep that somewhere. Okay, let's go to different. And then so you can go to the next slide in the Mentimeter link. What is different about the needs or reasons for participating in community sessions? What are the differences you see about the needs or reasons for participating in these community sessions? And we'll just take a few minutes, have you add it into the Mentimeter, and we'll start to see it show up. Some really good ones coming in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't we go up and scroll up and look at these? What are we seeing here? There's some themes that come, but there's also just a lot of difference.
Yeah. I was gonna say there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, there are a lot of kinds and types of differences.
Yeah. And
it can be easy to just, I'm thinking about your blog, Christine, recently about what is the
amplifying sameness and
yeah, and amplifying sameness, but it's also like sometimes our brains want to just categorize into like 3 or 4, but I think with this one, we just want to notice that there is quite a bit of types of differences.
I did go to the categorizing.
Yeah, what did you see? You can still share it.
A difference in relationship to the field, like availability of time and
Yeah.
how, is it our professional or so just a difference in relationship to the field, differences in understanding mapping, and then differences in home context in terms of the different use cases, also the different understandings of how privilege plays into it. So I was just noticing the different relationships to this that underlied all of these, or a lot of these differences.
I'm curious if any of you want to share anything you're noticing. You can speak your voice in the room or put it in chat.
I have a question about process. Like, these questions feel very like they're actually asking you to think about what others, the sameness and the difference across a group of people that you may or may not know really well. And there's like subjectiveness and to that. And I'm wondering, I don't know, I just wonder if that's on purpose or if that's helpful, or yeah, I'm just curious.
Christine, do you have?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's very helpful because, so I'm also noticing Rebecca, saying you're finding yourself grouping some responses that look similar to yourself. And I think that's a natural thing that we do. And we start to assume, like, I assume that my perspective on what's same and different is universal, is the same and different of the whole thing. And I'm probably closest because I know more people and I've been doing this longer. But the fact is, whenever I do these things, I'm like, oh yeah, that's my perspective, and hearing other people's subjective experience actually gives. So if the thing that I said earlier, like the cone where we're looking at it from this, the angle of the square or the angle of the circle, that's also true of everything we do. We can look at it from different angles. And so all of these differences. And so the usefulness is that then we start to see it from other people's perspective. And there isn't a universal truth. It's not like there are, any one, that any of this is going to, boil down to be the same for any of us, but having a discussion like this brings up a discussion where we can actually look from my subjectivity to your subjectivity to somebody else's subjectivity and sort of examine it more from more angles, and then start to find more, discover more things that we can discover on our own. So that was my thought.
And I should
Yes.
just clarify that what I meant was responses that look similar to each other. As I looked at it, 26 answers, and I was just sort of mulling whether that reflected basically like 5 or 6 or whatever, however many distinct sort of themes.
And
Yeah, and that makes sense.
I shouldn't have interpreted you, and I interpreted you to leverage what I was going to say, and I apologize. that wasn't what you, not only was that not what you meant, but I shouldn't have done that. So yeah.
But this is really interesting what's emerging here. So in HSD, we teach about different truths. So that's what Christine is mentioning. So there's subjective truth, which is what each of our perspectives is on the same and different. And we want to hear that. The more we hear each other's subjectivity or subjective truths, that's really valuable, because you're expanding your viewpoint, right, of that pattern that's emerging collectively. Then there's also another truth we teach in HSD called normative truth, which is a truth that the group holds. Often that's a form of implicit or explicit values that your network has. And so, Rebecca, what you were pointing out might be some normative truth we see happening in the network. If there's several of you that actually have that same view of the same or different, then that's what would be a normative truth that's held more by the group, which is also can be a valuable place to speak about. Objective truth is probably minimal in this kind of activity, because I mean, really what we're looking for in HSD, we talk about complex truth, and it's the truth that's going to be most helpful for this moment of what you're looking at, whatever that sticky issue or challenge you're looking at. And often it's going to be around the subjectivity there. And so seeing that and really being able to explore that in a way, I find it also helps explore if we have difference about how we view difference. It kind of helps with that. So I see Brian, your hand is up, and Jim. So Brian, why don't you go first?
Yeah. Okay. Is there an evolution of normative truths?
I was going to say, like Lisa, as you were talking, I was going to say, the same, what's the same is kind of already
is a normative truth. Yeah.
Truth. And then that can evolve as we take differences more and more into account. Just Jim.
Yeah, normative truth definitely is, there's an evolution. It can be changing. Yeah. And often when you're working on culture of your network or your community, that's what you're working on, is shifting those normative truths. That's where, Jim.
Just a comment and a question. The comment is that it seems like the tensions that show up as differences can help build generatively a collective or normative truth, and that those bringing that it's a hugely important process for us to be able to see those differences and then work with them, especially if they're really structural. So that seems transformative, and the building of mutual respect as you start to see everybody has these different viewpoints and stuff, and then holding them loosely together. Where, Christine, do you see in the explainer graphic that you did, do you see this collectivizing and awareness? There's a mindset shift here about seeing these different perspectives. Where do you see it in the whole 10 slides that you did? Where do you see that happening most significantly?
Well, so it feels to me like the loop, the cognitive loops are when we're working on the relational part, when we're using a map for relationship building, we're sort of like introducing people who might know each other or convening people around a similar strategy or a similar topic or whatever. We're relationship building. When we take the time to step back and say, what's the same and different on the map, or what's the same and different around this particular, subset of questions. And we do that with others in the community, and so that we're starting to think together about what's the same and different, what's the difference that makes a difference, what could we do to actually make the community stronger. That's, in my mind, that's systems thinking, that's complexity thinking. And so it's in what is currently those orange loops, is this kind of activity shared with the community, like, so that there's a collective conversation that helps everyone start to see from more perspectives, and start to see that there are more perspectives, and start to work with the difference between our subjective truths and our normative truth, and be conscious of that and intentional around that. And that not doing that or avoiding doing that is what I think leads to, what I'm saying leads to strong networks that are not at all transformational, because they're just going on their knee-jerk usual understanding of what's going on, and they're not actually working to expand their thinking to other perspectives.
I'm thinking what I should do is just mention, Christine, one of the things you can do, just showing you how you can use this model with your network. So when you have that list of same and different, one of the things you can do is when you look at the differences, you can collectively as a group sort of look through and give it a rating of 3 different options. One is it's kind of neutral to whatever that sticky issue is that you have. One is a plus sign, like this, like if we could leverage this difference, or if we focus on this difference, it could help with our sticky issue. And one is a negative sign, like if we looked at the, if we if we expanded this difference, this would hurt our sticky issue. Just something that you can do as another step to kind of help figure out the difference that makes a difference. But well, let me just go back to the slides, Christine, and show what maybe you can talk through the now what and what of what you looked at with the community.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so just to be honest, I didn't do this with the community overtly. I did this in my own head, from my own
Right.
from my
As
own
an example. Yeah.
Yeah. But
That's good. That's good to clarify that.
Yeah, and you can do it. You can do just it by yourself. It's
right.
Works better to do it with more people, or perhaps it just makes it more tense and more volatile depending on the situation. But so the thing that what was really sticky for me, kept being sticky for me, was knowing so many of these differences, and I'm trying to do things, and I'm getting people telling me you should do this, you should do that, and not only do I often not have the capacity to do this and that, but often it's like, yeah, but that would be a negative, like that's going to serve one group but not the other group, and it's the other group that is most important here, or, it'd be like who's getting served and who's getting not served by these suggestions. Anyway, so these differences, I did this same different thing, and I landed on the biggest difference that felt important to think about and work on at that point in time was the difference in levels of engagement, like who's willing to show up regularly and share their thinking and really be committed to supporting this community, who shows up periodically or episodically, and who's here for the very first time, and who's just here to get their questions answered, who wants to do some co-creation, and who wants to really be responsible. And starting to distinguish with each of those levels helped me both think more about how we design and structure the community as well as the sessions, but also call that out more with everybody else, so that we didn't go through this exercise, but I've been pointing to those differences and trying to help us get clear on the differences, so that those of us who are deep into this understand what we're talking about and where we're focusing when we're thinking about what to do next, and not just having this sort of universal, any good thing that comes from, that would either serve me or just feels like a good idea, that we're clear about who are we aiming at and what are we trying to give them, because that was really mushy before, and that has been really helpful. So that was the difference that made a difference when I did this a while ago. And
so then the now what is, and these are questions you could ask if you're doing this for yourself or with your community. So what difference has the most energy, or what difference would make the most difference to that sticky issue?
Yeah.
And then the now what, then you have an action. So you have the action that came out of that.
Yeah, was just, I mushed them together. I'm sorry. But so
Well, that's all right.
so the now what was to be much more clear, to start collectively being much more clear about who we're whenever we're talking about anything in the community, be clear about which group are we talking about, which group has a need, which group are we trying to engage, which group are we trying to design for, which group should we ask things of, etc.
Yep, that's right. So I'm looking at time, and I think we want to go into breakouts for a little bit of time to have you absorb this and think about what might be a sticky issue that could benefit from a same different method. So in the breakouts, there'll be just 3 of you. It'll be the same group you were with for your intros. What is a sticky issue? These are the questions we have for you. What's a sticky issue your network or community is facing? And it could be the challenge that you mentioned when you first came in to the workshop or to the session today. And then, so what is the same different topic you can explore with your network or community related to that sticky issue? So it's just maybe brainstorming some ideas of how you might use this method with your group. So we'll go into breakouts. Should we do 10 minutes?
Sounds good.
Looking at time, Christine. Okay, 10 minutes. We'll do that, and then we'll come back and we have 5 minutes to debrief and wrap up. Welcome back, everybody. Anyone willing to, we have time, we only have 5 minutes, so we have time for at least a couple of you to share anything that came up, anything you're discovering in your breakouts.
I kind of got cut off in our meeting, so I can maybe finish it and then I can do it. We kind of spoke about our own networks and then the community of practice, and we ended up on the whole idea that was raised about how often people feel they need to commit to this community of practice. And we were saying it wasn't really clear, like it seemed very casual, like in and out, like people could come if they want. And do we want to set up parameters for people, like you come once a month or not? And then Tom had some sharings. And I was going to say, for me, it's so easy to justify because my title is Network Weaver for my job. So this is work, right? So plus I love it, but it is also work. So I'm thinking for someone else who might have a different title, but have an interest, it might be difficult for them to get away every week to even count this as professional development. Like I include this as free professional development. So that's where I was ending off with Rebecca and Tom. And I don't know if Tom, because you had a good point you were saying too, if you wanted to bring it up, but we kind of went back and forth. That's all.
That's great.
I think my point, just to follow up, Denise, was I'm trying to learn like what the cause is and where we're trying to go and what we hope to happen, and where the understanding that a good transformative network has to help both me do what I want to do, but I also want to make sure it's contributing to the greater cause. And I just had to more discover that through making a decision to jump in, not knowing necessarily what I was doing or even what this community of practice decrees as success.
Yeah. That's interesting to note that, and how that emerged too as a noticing and doing this, both of you. And another difference that came up, right? The difference of, or just like diving into that difference about this is your job focus versus maybe not, and that could be a really important place to explore more for the community. Brian.
Yeah, one of the differences we had in our group was people who wanted to vote within the system they're in, and talk about it and come up with other ideas. And people who wanted to go in front of the bank and actually protest. And there was a objection that, well, for protesting, that might turn people off. But then I thought, how many movements there have been in history where we started off with people protesting, like the Vietnam War or gay marriage, and then over time, somehow or other, it became mainstream. And the connection between where we were and how we got there is kind of like, not obvious. It's like something happened we boiled the water underneath and we changed and we transformed something, how some or other. And I think that's an interesting concept. So just want to raise that.
That's really great. I mean, in HSD, we talk about that as dynamical or complex change, where there's a lot of underlying things happening that you can't see that are massively entangled, and then all of a sudden something will break forth, and that's your change moment. But you have to, yeah, the tipping point. Yep. Christine, do you want to add? I'm going to turn over to you, just given the limited time to take us out here.
So I just appreciated everybody's input, and feel like that list of differences is something we can go back to look at as we work on our, our evolution of this community of practice, and what you called out, Denise and Tom, about the different relationships to the whole thing and what maybe should be happening or could be happening. Those are conversations that, in the ones of us who are really have already taken on responsibility are beginning to look at and grapple with, just even in our distinguishing the different nested context. So thank you for all that. And let's go ahead, and we're at the bottom of the hour. So we'll go ahead and do our goodbye ritual, which I think you all know how that works. So Rebecca, if you're not, we're all going to unmute. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and then we're just all going to give each other our greetings and blessings for the rest of the day. So everybody unmute. 3, 2, 1. No, 3, 2.
Thank
Thank you.
Great week.
Have a wonderful day.
Yep.